Hello and welcome to Magic Rays of Light, a podcast exploring the world of Apple TV and so much more. This is episode 85, and this week's episode is brought to you by Sequel, the ultimate media tracker. I am, of course, Sigmund Judge, and I am joined after a week away, nice and refreshed, by my co-host, Mr. Devon Dundee. How are you?
Hey, I'm good. I am nice and refreshed. We had a nice long holiday weekend this week here for July the 4th, and I'm ready to jump into the world of Apple TV with you.
Not only was it July 4th, Independence Day, but it was also your birthday. So a double celebration. But of course, as we do every week, we celebrate Apple TV. And this week we do so by recapping Apple original dystopian noir thriller Silo. We check in on the latest social media craze that's got everyone fretting away. But we start with a highlight, the Afterparty Season 2. In the second season of the Afterparty, a wedding is ruined when the groom is murdered and every guest is a suspect. Detective Dana returns to help Anique and Zoe solve whodunit by questioning family members, star-crossed lovers, and business partners by hearing each suspect's retelling of the weekend, each with their own unique perspective and visual style.
Look who decided to call. Has there been another murder?
Actually... Number one suspect is the bride, Zoe's sister.
Grace didn't do it.
We got a dead body and a whole lot of people to talk to. What's your name? You fine as hell.
Sebastian.
Travis.
We'd like to hear your accounts of what happened. I like to call them your mind movies.
She was all trouble. And for the record, the case wasn't the only thing that was hard.
Oh, God.
Let us raise a toast to the happy couple.
This whole thing is so much more complex than you guys realize.
We all have our secrets.
Oh, Devon, this is one that we've been looking forward to for a long, long time, and a show that we cannot wait to discuss, because the first season, which came from, of course, Academy Award winners Chris Miller and Phil Lord, centered around a mysterious death following a high school reunion, as each suspect recounted their steps for the night leading up to the murder, with what Detective Dana coined as mind movies. But this season's far more expanded and does have a slightly different feel. So tell us about the premise of the story and the characters.
Yep, this after party is a totally different event. It actually takes place after a wedding. When a groom is found murdered the morning after his wedding, every guest is a suspect. Anique calls in detective turned aspiring author Danner to help solve the case and help absolve Zoe's sister of the crime. So similar concept, but I really love the way they've brought this whole thing back together. They're, of course, reuniting Tiffany Haddish as Danner, Sam Richardson as Anique, and Zoe Chow as Zoe. That's the carryover from season 1, but they're in this totally new scenario where they've got to pull out their sleuthing skills yet again and solve a murder. Let's talk about the new cast and characters. You've got Poppy Liu as Grace, who is the bride at the wedding. Zach Woods as Edgar, the deceased husband. Thankfully, we do get quite a bit from Zach Woods in the Mind movies, because he's one of those actors you just can't waste, especially in a comedy. Yeah, he's a really interesting character. Elizabeth Perkins as Isabel, Edgar's mother. Anna Conkle as Hannah, Edgar's adopted sister. She wants you to know for sure that she is adopted. Jack Whitehall as Sebastian, his business partner. Ken Jeong as Fang, and Vivian Wu as Vivian, Zoe and Grace's parents. John Cho as Zoe and Grace's uncle Ulysses, or Funkle as they call him. And, of course, Paul Walter Hauser as Grace's eccentric ex-boyfriend Travis, who considers himself a bit of a detective, but only on Reddit.
Yeah. Part of a Reddit guild, solved a number of murders. Now, I think the interesting thing here is, obviously, First off, the introduction of an incredible ensemble cast yet again. Very, very funny throughout. But it does feel like there's more of an international tone, which is fantastic to see. The interesting change in terms of characters, the ones that we know from season 1, are the kind of conflicts of interest and the different dynamics now for the once Detective Dana, who is now an author, Zoe and Anique, who start off as a happy couple, trying to solve the mystery together, but quickly Anique sees that there may be a conflict of interest, seeing how close Zoe is to the potential suspects. And I thought that was a really, really interesting move, especially for Tiffany Haddish's character.
Yeah, she's got her own conflict of interest, right? Because she's working on this book about the story of season 1, but here is another situation that could be, a sequel to her book. And so she's got her own motivations for trying to figure things out and maybe flare up the drama just a little bit. It's funny, a show like this that has such a unique approach and is now coming back for a season 2 has to, of course, make it make sense. But it also becomes self-referential in a way, almost meta. And we see that from the very first episode where when Anique calls Detective Danner, she immediately asks if we're in for a sequel to his rom-com mind movie from season 1. I think that's the only genre that we're going to see repeat this season. Now, of course, each character gets to tell their own mind movie in their own way, but I think we've got some interesting genres coming up this season, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, first off, I do want to mention the first episode because it is kind of beyond a rom-com sequel in a way, because it's in the style of one of my favourite rom-com sequels, Meet the Fockers, the follow-up to Meet the Parents, the Ben Stiller, De Niro classic. And there's even a couple of callbacks to, like, There's Something About Mary in there as well. So really, really cool. But yeah, let's talk about some of the other genres we can expect this season.
Well, the second episode is a Victorian period drama, which was very interesting. You kind of throw in some of that old English, maybe like a Bridgerton type episode. Very cool. But we can also expect a noir detective story, a Wes Anderson homage, and a Hitchcockian horror, along with some other great genres. These mind movies are so cool. It's a great way to explore different methods of storytelling and filmmaking throughout a show, but also keeping it tied together throughout kind of the meta story of the investigation. And I can't wait to see what they do with these genres.
Now, a big part of the season 1 enjoyment was trying to figure out who would be the killer. I think when we gave our predictions last year, we kind of overthought it a little bit. I may have pinned a murder on an innocent 12-year-old girl, which I still can't to this day let down. But let's talk about our predictions for the culprit or culprits behind this murder. And I'm going to start because, be honest with you, the one person that when this cast came out that I thought, it's totally going to be this guy. I've not swayed from this. I think it's going to be Sebastian, played by Jack Whitehall, who infamously starred in Clifford the Big Red Dog and is pretty much the funny man in everything he does, due to the fact he's also a stand-up comedian. This role is very different for Jack Whitehall because he's, for once, an unlikable British rogue with some ulterior motives that I feel like just push him a little bit further. He is the business partner of the deceased. There's a lot to do with cryptocurrency in this season. I don't know. I just feel like he could be involved in some kind of mass conspiracy, but I'm not going there, Devon, because I went down this route last time, which makes me think it's probably going to happen. I think it's Sebastian and others. What are you thinking through the trailer and through the first couple of episodes that we've seen that are going to be premiering this week?
I like the Sebastian theory. He's an interesting character. He's also very controlling of Edgar's schedule. So if he wanted to do something nefarious, I think he could probably pull it off. But I'm actually not going to go with Sebastian. I am going to go with Isabel, played by Elizabeth Perkins, Edgar's mother. And here's my theory on this, okay? There's some hints throughout the first couple of episodes that she might be having some memory trouble.
Okay.
She doesn't remember Grace's name, and there's just a couple little things that I think could be hints there about maybe her not having the best memory at the moment. I think she's trying to poison Grace, and something goes horribly wrong, and she ends up accidentally killing her son. That's my theory. Again, I probably did like we did last year and went a little too far, but you know what? I'm going to stick to it, and we'll see what happens as the season progresses.
Absolutely. The Afterparty Season 2 premieres this coming Wednesday on Apple TV+, available across all of your screens. Let us know your predictions for the Afterparty Season 2 via iMessage, email, or social media. Hopefully we can piece the clues together, and all of those links can be found in the show notes. Detective work is obviously not limited to the Afterparty Season 2, because we have a roaming Apple detective by the name of Mark Gurman, who has given us a little bit of news with regard to new home products from Apple, including smart displays and an Apple TV with improved specifications in early development. I mean, that's very vague, but it got me thinking, okay, if there is a new Apple TV coming, the one thing that has got an upgrade the last few iterations has been the Apple TV remote. And if we know anything by the rumors, we're hearing about a custom button possibly coming to the next iPhone. We've had a custom button on the Apple Watch Ultra for a year now. And it got me thinking, Devon, if the next Siri remote was to have a custom button, what would you want it to do?
Oh man, I would love to have an action button on the side of the Siri remote. I think that'd be amazing, that you can set to do whatever you want. There's so many possibilities, so many things I would want to do with it. But I think the thing I would probably set it to and stick with is a shortcut for the "what did they just say" Siri command. There are so many times when I ask myself that question, wait a second, what did that person just say? But it takes my brain too long to make the connection that, oh, I need to ask Siri that. And by the time I actually get around to it, it's been more than 10 seconds. And so even if I asked, it wouldn't be included in the command. So if I could just push a button really quickly, initiate that, go back 10 seconds, turn on the captions, yeah, I think that would be really sweet.
Absolutely love that. And to be honest with you, I think that's probably the best case scenario. But of course, I've been thinking about this a bit more. And so I thought that initially a action button on the next Siri remote would be really cool for HomeKit scenes. Mm-hmm. That was my first thought. But ideally, I'd like to see a customizable button with customizable functions depending on the app you're in.
Oh.
That's something that we've seen come to watchOS. So I would imagine this is something that would be really cool for developers, or maybe even the possibility of actioning particular shortcuts if and when actions can be called through tvOS itself. It's something that we expected to come this year. It hasn't yet. Maybe it will later on, if not tvOS 18. And someone that's dying for that kind of integration is friend of the show, Matthew Cassinelli.
Yes, he put out a really interesting article this week about some shortcuts he's made for Apple TV. He's been digging really deep into the URL scheme for different things that you can access on the Apple TV and in the TV app on your other platforms. And I thought this was a really interesting set of shortcuts. There's some stuff in there that I had not seen. I, too, have tried to play in that URL scheme before, and he got way further with it than I ever did. So we will link that in the show notes. Be sure to check out his Apple TV shortcuts. They are very cool and well worth adding to your shortcuts library.
Now, reverting back very quickly to rumors, on Friday, David Altizer posted a reportedly leaked photo of the 180-degree VR camera being used on set for Apple original productions, alongside the claim that Apple has been shooting all of its shows in 180 degrees. Now, whilst the rig pictured had begun selling to production houses in 2018, it's unlikely the main shows have been shot in this format due to the set production costs and the behind the scenes footage we've seen thus far for Apple Originals. However, if any captures have taken place during the early days, I think it's more likely that they're for supplemental experiences or maybe even behind the scenes footage. That's something that we've always wanted, more behind the scenes, more of a look into how films are made. And it's still something I would love to see Apple delve more into for aspiring filmmakers and film and TV show lovers like us. If any captures have taken place during the early days, you'd imagine, as I say, it's likely that they're going to be for supplemental experiences. And as per our sources, original content in Apple's immersive video format has shot for the upcoming Godzilla series, which led to some confusion that the whole series would be shot in the format, which of course would be a logistical nightmare. Whilst there's been rumours of more in production, this is the first time we're seeing evidence direct from set, Devon. I'm interested to know what your thoughts are on, as I say, the first look at Apple shooting for 180 degrees.
I love this. It's so exciting to hear more and more. Right now we're still in the world of rumors, but I always believe where there's smoke, there's fire, and there seems to be a lot of smoke here that Apple are doing some kind of work with their immersive video format and the 180 degree filming for Apple Originals. There are a lot of stories for Apple Vision Pro that have not been told yet. You know, we've just barely gotten our first taste of what it's going to be like, and the Apple TV Plus story for Apple Vision Pro certainly has not been told at all, but I think it's going to be a good one, and I can't wait to see what they're coming up with for people like us who love Apple TV Plus, and maybe for people who are interested more in what the Apple Vision Pro can do, and this might be a way to introduce them to Apple TV Plus and Apple Originals as well.
Now, you may have missed that photo because you've probably been too busy on Threads this week to have noticed it. Let's talk about this new social media platform in town, one that I think is going to consolidate the world of tech and entertainment in a new home. I'd say the last few months, everyone's been trying to find a new space, and this seems to be the one.
Yes, everyone seems really excited for this new text-based social media platform, of course, from Meta, the owners of Instagram and Facebook. It's being branded as an Instagram product, and you can actually sign in using your Instagram handle, which is a really cool process that made it really simple to get started on it. There are a ton of not only people, but also brands and organizations that are jumping on board with Threads. There were 10 million signups in the first 24 hours alone. Now we're up over 70 million users, and we're not even a week out from the launch of Threads just yet. But there are so many different news organizations that I'm so excited to see, things in the world of film and TV and production, stuff like that I've been having trouble keeping up with during all of this sort of shuffling around that's been going on. So I'm really happy to be able to follow them there on Threads. One company is notably absent right now, at least, and that's Apple themselves. Of course, they have quite a presence on Twitter. That's where we get a lot of our Apple TV news and Apple Original Film news from. There is an Apple News account on Threads, but so far it has not posted anything, and we haven't seen any of Apple's other accounts move over. There has been some movement on one Apple account on Instagram, though. Just this morning, the iTunes account on Instagram started rebranding itself as the Apple Original Films account. It's still in transition as we speak now, but it looks like they're going to do the same approach on Instagram as they do on Twitter, where they have Apple TV and Apple Original Films. Maybe that's laying the groundwork for something on Threads. I don't know, but I've got my fingers crossed. I'd love to be able to keep up with Apple Originals on Threads as well.
I know the one worry about this is going to be from Apple TV users that still use iTunes Movies and the iTunes TV show apps. Could this be the death knell for those apps now that we're moving away from the iTunes brand? Let's hope not, at least until we see something new from the TV app itself. I guess one question I have for you very quickly is, what do we call it? On Twitter, you tweet. on Fred? You Fred? Or are we Fredding one another? Because that sounds a bit strange.
I think you post a thread or share a thread. I think the content is the thread. I don't think the thread is the verb. I could be wrong. We're still all figuring it out.
One thing that I definitely haven't figured out yet, and I think this is something that I have specifically happen to me each time there's a new platform. I feel this innate pressure on what my debut post is going to be, when really it should just be a hello world, just like the days of blogging. But I have been perusing the service and watching what everyone else is posting right now. And my first thoughts are, this is great. There's a lot that I need to see come in before it's something that I feel like is going to be my social media home, so to speak. And potentially there's a lot more to Threads that meets the eye right now, especially when it comes to centralized and federated platforms.
That's right. From everything we've heard, Threads is being built on the foundation of ActivityPub, which also undergirds platforms like Mastodon and PixelFed and other different platforms you might have heard of within the so-called Fediverse. And we know that within those existing platforms, they can all interact with each other. You can communicate with people on different platforms and servers from your own without having to actually sign up for a bunch of different accounts. And so the promise of federation for Threads is that once they get that finished and flip that switch, then people who are on Mastodon or another service will be able to follow those on Threads and vice versa without everyone having to have an account on any specific service. You can kind of pick where you want to be, what server you want to be on, but you can still interact with people on other servers. And with Threads being so simple to sign up, with it being a place that so many people and brands and organizations want to be, once all those accounts are a part of the Fediverse and able to be accessed from places like Mastodon and the like, I think that's got some really exciting possibilities for people like me who feel very much at home on Mastodon in my favorite Mastodon client, but I still want to be able to access all my friends and family and everyone else who is on Threads. This is really the promise of federation coming to fruition. Now, we're still waiting. We don't know exactly how long it'll be until Threads actually flips that switch. We know they kind of pushed up the launch to take advantage of some other things going on in the world of social media. It seems to have worked out for them. But, getting 70 million new people on the Fediverse and making that available to everyone who's already in that decentralized world, I think that can only be good for the internet, for the future of social media, and, selfishly for me personally. So I'm excited.
Well, we welcome competition in the world of social media, and one person that is very familiar with the competitive spirit is, of course, Stephen Curry, the subject of an upcoming documentary, Stephen Curry Underrated, a feature documentary blending intimate cinema variety, archival footage, and on-camera interviews documenting Curry's rise from an undersized college player to a 4-time NBA champion, building one of the most dominant sports dynasties in the world.
Stephen Curry. Do not rely on him to run your team.
He was about 5'6".
Looks like a little kid.
150 pounds soaking wet.
That was when I first really understood I'm different. How did I get here? I was the undersized, scrawny kid that was just trying to figure out how to make it.
Steph Curry is hurt.
I was overwhelmed by everything. How would I respond? Let the work begin.
The trailer was short and sweet from A24, one of my favorite production houses. It's rare that we see a documentary for a sports star still really at the peak of their powers. This looks like a really interesting documentary. I think even for those that aren't too au fait with his career, but have maybe heard the name.
I don't know of anyone who hasn't heard the name Stephen Curry. He's just so dominant in the world of basketball. As someone who doesn't watch a lot of basketball, even I'm familiar with him and interested in hearing more about his story. It is such an interesting time in his career to be looking back, because it really feels like he's still building up to his full potential as a player. Not that he's not been accomplishing a lot, but I think he's still got a lot of success ahead of him. So this is kind of that midpoint, maybe look back, or maybe even the prelude. I don't know. But I do think that a documentary about him is going to appeal to a lot of people. And again, a lot of folks that maybe aren't already on Apple TV Plus, but who would check it out to see a documentary about him. I think this is going to be great. Stephen Curry Underrated is streaming July 21st only on Apple TV Plus.
Of course, Stephen Curry Underrated wasn't the only trailer we got this past week. We saw teasers for Invasion and Foundation Season 2, but I think the headline trailer this week is for a film that's not coming out for a few months yet, but one that we are eagerly anticipating, and that is Martin Scorsese's Killers of the Flower Moon. At the turn of the 20th century, oil brought a fortune to the Osage Nation, who became some of the richest people in the world overnight. The wealth of those Native Americans immediately attracting white interlopers who manipulate, extort, and steal as much Osage money as they could before resorting to murder. This is, of course, based on a true story and told through the improbable romance of Ernest Buckhart and Molly Kyle. And it looks to be an epic Western crime saga where real love crosses paths with unspeakable betrayal. We got a trailer, or a first look, a couple of months ago, which really kind of set the scene, didn't give too much away. Now we're getting more of a narrative-driven trailer. And I'm not too sure if you agree with me on this, but the tone was a surprising change.
Yes, the shift from the first trailer to the second is definitely an interesting jump. I think the first one was really out there. This one's more action-packed. It's much faster, and it really gives you an idea very quickly of what this story is about and what you can expect. It looks to be honestly brutal on so many levels. But I think both of these trailers really point to different aspects of the film and maybe even different audiences that it's going to appeal to. Of course, you've got your cinema lovers who are there for the cinematography and the artistry of it all, and I think they're going to be very pleased by this film. But then you've got the more mass cinematic audience who kind of just go to the movies and see what's available. And I think that they're trying to do as much as they can to draw those people in as well. I think that what they're doing with the marketing is really trying to make sure that it appeals to as many people as possible and tell the story about the story, right? And really get people hooked and wanting to see more. I think one way they're really going to grab a lot of people's attention is, of course, with the cast. You've got Leonardo DiCaprio. If you remember the first image we saw of him, he was described as unrecognizable. Visually, I think it's pretty easy to tell who he is, but when he's speaking, it's so different from what we've seen him do before. So anyway, I thought that was noteworthy. You've also got Lily Gladstone, Robert De Niro, Jesse Plemons, John Lithgow, Brendan Fraser, Tantu Cardinal, Cara Jade Myers, Janie Collins, and Jillian Dion. And if you think I didn't spend enough time on any of those names, you're completely right, but that is just how packed this cast is. And honestly, you watch the trailer, they don't spend a ton of time on any of these actors either. There's just so much to show you. This film, I think it just has so much to offer, and I can't wait to see it when it comes exclusively to theaters this October.
This week we also got quite a bit of release news, and this is a surprise to me because I knew it was coming, but the announcement came out of nowhere. Animated series Strange Planet from Dan Harmon and Nathan W. Pyle will debut on Apple TV Plus Wednesday, August 9th, and will air its 10 episodes weekly through September 27th. This series is based on Pyle's popular comic of the same name. Strange Planet is what we've heard to be an hilarious and perceptive look at a distant world not unlike our own, but a world that I think is a lot kinder than our own. A whimsical world of cotton candy pinks and purples, full of relatable blue beings exploring the absurdity of everyday human traditions. Now, I don't know if you've checked out the strips on social media or the books that was spawned from that, but I have, and what I expected from this upcoming show was the same kind of thing, but like in animated form. What we're getting, though, are 25-minute episodes, which blew my mind. What this is an evolution of the characters and that world, which I'm really surprised by, and really I'm hoping will translate to screen. What do you think?
I can't get enough of the Strange Planet comics. I eat them up. When I get to the end of one, I'm like, wait, there needs to be more. This is so funny, you know? And so I'm happy for the length. This is a kind of humor that is not all that common. The way that it kind of looks at the world, it's a very unique perspective. And so I think this has something to offer that a lot of people won't be familiar with, but I think a lot of people will be able to laugh at and enjoy and maybe even get some insights from, because these perspectives are also ones that we can learn from. I think the combining of Nathan W. Pyle and Dan Harmon is really smart. Of course, Dan Harmon has a pretty strong track record in comedy in general, but also in, animation as well. And so combining the humor of Strange Planet that's already established with someone who knows how to make a successful adult animated series, I think this is going to be a win. I'm excited how quickly it's coming, and I can't wait to check this out next month. Something else we'll be checking out next month is Invasion Season 2, which is officially coming on August 23rd. If you haven't seen the teaser trailer for that one, be sure to check it out in the show notes. Then the next month, in September, we're getting The Morning Show Season 3, returning for its 10-episode third season on Wednesday, September 13th. We got some first look photos for that season. Of course, we'll link those in the show notes. And no need to fear, Sigmund. You don't have to worry that the third one's going to be the last one, because it's already been renewed for a fourth season. So lots more morning show to come. Finally, author Victor LaValle revealed in an interview with Black Girl Nerds that the series adaptation of his novel The Changeling, starring Lakeith Stanfield, is coming to Apple TV Plus this September, with a trailer due next month. The series is described as a fairy tale for grown-ups, a horror story, a parenthood fable, and a perilous odyssey through a New York City you didn't know existed.
Now, on to some slightly sad news. We got a number of announcements for non-renewals this past week, starting with one that I don't think was a big surprise, unfortunately. As much as we enjoyed the first season, Patricia Arquette revealed via Instagram that High Desert was not renewed for a second season by Apple TV+. Really sad to see. However, I think a really important point that was pointed out by executive producer Ben Stiller, who thanked everyone alongside Patricia Arquette for their performances and their hard work bringing this story to life, is that Apple don't remove series from the service and don't lock it away, never to be seen again, like some other streamers we've mentioned in the last few months. That's great news, not only for High Desert, but also for Coach Danny Cage, who announced on Twitter that wrestling documentary series Monster Factory, which I got to tell you, Devon, is one of my reality TV show highlights. Yes, I am a reality TV show and a wrestling nerd, so this worked out for me. Unfortunately, will not be renewed for a second season. However, I feel like you'll be able to follow each wrestler's story through their social media profiles, which are incredibly active, and the New Jersey wrestling school from which the documentary series took its name. Now, a show that we've both been loving, I've watched the whole show, I think you're watching it week by week, is of course the Apple original thriller Hijack with Idris Elba, also executive produced by Idris Elba, who at one point had a first look deal with Apple. Well, as revealed by Idris Elba this past week, that first look deal has since expired. That said, no hard feelings, as you will find more from Idris Elba across Apple Music. And I didn't realise to what extent his musical endeavours were before listening to an interview this past week over on Apple Music. Check it out if you haven't. A great bonus to the Hijack performance that we can enjoy through the rest of the summer.
Well, that's it for the downer news. Let's move on to some more positive news. We heard a little bit more about Apple original film Napoleon this week. It is reported to have a runtime of 2 hours and 27 minutes, according to a listing on the South Korean Rating Board's website. Of course, we love our databases and the information that they reveal. Hopefully we'll be seeing a full trailer before too long. And Ted Lasso was streamed for 1.24 billion minutes the week of its season 3 finale, the first Apple original series to break 1 billion minutes watched in a week. It was the third most streamed series for that week, according to Nielsen. Those are some huge numbers, and it wasn't just the finale that people were streaming. I think the finale was about half of those numbers, and the other half was people streaming the rest of the series as well. So Ted Lasso just really punching hard on Apple TV Plus and doing a great job in the world of streaming. Of course, we still don't know what the future is for the world of Ted Lasso. If we'll see anything in production in that world before too long, we'll have to wait and see. One thing we do know for sure is in production, though, is Apple's Formula One racing film, which is filming at the British Grand Prix this weekend. And this week, Apple and Formula One released a first look at the film starring Brad Pitt. The image shows the fictional APX GP team's car that will be driven in the movie. I imagine they were getting ready to take it out on the track, so they thought, well, why not reveal it to the world as well? I don't know a lot about F1 or about that whole world or what those cars looks like, but I will say this one looks pretty cool.
A really cool fact about the production of this film is that the British Grand Prix is not going to be the one and only Grand Prix. This is going to be a touring team. So we'll be able to report which Grand Prix they're at next. But yeah, a huge endeavour. Cannot wait to see the fruits of the labour sometime, hopefully, in 2024. Something we hope doesn't take until 2024 to resolve itself is, of course, the many negotiations between the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers and the many workers across the TV and movie industry. It looks like we're underway in getting to a close on some negotiations, with the Directors Guild of America members voting on the terms of their new contract between the DGA and the AMPTP, bringing the industry closer to achieving some peace. Of course, the AMTP studios include Amazon, Apple, CBS, Disney, NBC Universal, Netflix, Paramount Global, Sony, and Warner Brothers Discovery, with the DGA and Leslie Linker Glatter, President DGA, announcing on Friday, June 23rd, that 87% of its membership had voted in favour of the new agreement, which includes several improvements for DGA members, including extensive wage advances, global streaming residuals, diversity, and safety and creative rights. The deal also sets in place minimum terms and conditions in 2 new areas: non-dramatic programs made for subscription video on demand, and high-budget dramatic programs made for advertising-supported video on demand, with new provisions confirming that generative artificial intelligence cannot replace the duties performed by members. Negotiations started on May 10th, so there was quite a quick turnaround on this one. Of course, the next priority for the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers is negotiating new terms with SAG-AFTRA, with a deadline set in negotiations for July 12th, before the possibility of actors picketing alongside WGA members. So, I think in short, we hope that things are resolved and that there is a fair compromise. But in terms of productions going forward, I think it's fair to say we expect some interruptions.
And to all the creatives out there, of course, we stand with you. Now, while we're waiting for production to pick back up after these negotiations are settled, we do have some interesting sports news to keep us busy and chattering away in the meantime. This week we got a rumor from sports reporter John Wilner of the Mercury News, who wrote that he believes Apple is currently the frontrunner for Pac-12 football rights starting in 2024. He also believes the agreement will be announced within the next few weeks, so we might not be far off from learning about Apple's next big move in sports, this time into the world of college American football. Now, I'm not the world's best source on sports news, Sigmund, but I am at least aware of the zeitgeist, and I try to keep up with these stories. The Pac-12 is one of the few college divisions that still have sports rights available. Most of those are tied up for the foreseeable future, and they seem open to doing something different, maybe trying out something new, which, of course, is the kind of people that Apple like to work with. And so if they could get something worked out with Apple where they could do international rights, try college American football in other countries, not just here in the US, if they could do something creative, maybe when it comes to immersive video content and stuff like that, I could see this working out really well. Apple seems to be powering on with Friday Night Baseball and MLS Season Pass. Those seem to be doing well. But of course, football is huge here in the United States. It's one of those sports that lots of people are obsessed with. College football especially is one of those identity things. If you went to a certain school or if someone that you love went to that school, you will stick with that school through thick and thin, no matter how they're performing. This is the kind of thing, they could get some really passionate fans involved here. I think this could be a great deal for Apple and the Pac-12 to really push college football into the next era of broadcasting.
It is, of course, our time for Apple FYC, and this week we saw 6 nominations for Apple Original Series at the Television Critics Awards. 3 nominations for Shrinking, Outstanding New Program, Outstanding Achievement in Comedy, Individual Achievement in Comedy for Harrison Ford, alongside Outstanding Achievement in Movies, Miniseries or Specials for Blackbird, Outstanding Achievement in Children's Programming for Ava the Owlet, and Outstanding Achievement in Family Programming for Jane. Winners will be announced on August 7th.
At the Dorian TV Awards, Apple TV Plus took home 1 award for Campiest TV Show, awarded to Schmigadoon. I would say that is quite fitting. And Ted Lasso will be presented with the Inclusion Award at the African American Film Critics Association TV Honors on August 27th for choosing to prioritize representation of people from all walks of life. You love to see that. Ted Lasso, of course, wonderful show pushing forward for inclusion, and very deserving honor indeed. As we mentioned at the beginning of the episode, this week's episode is sponsored by Sequel, the ultimate media tracking app. Keep track of movies, shows, games, books, and audiobooks. It's designed to simplify and streamline the management of your entertainment library so you can make the most of your leisure time. You've heard me go on and on about using Sequel to track TV shows. It's my favorite way to keep track of what I'm watching across all of my streaming services, including Netflix, which is a great addition. It's also a great way to keep track of what's coming up next. I love to see the episodes that are coming out over the coming week and when new seasons are going to debut, especially on Apple TV Plus, as I'm planning out what I'm going to watch. But Sequel is not just for tracking TV shows. You can also track all of your other media as well. It helps you streamline your tracking, make sure that you're not missing anything, so that if a new episode comes out or if there's a movie that you're wanting to watch, you will know when it comes out and make sure that you watch it. And it's great for picking what you want to enjoy next. If you get stuck trying to figure out what it is you want to watch, staring at the Netflix app up on your TV screen, or if you don't know what game it is you want to play next, just pull up your Sequel library. You can see what you've saved before and let your past self pick what you're going to enjoy now. Sequel comes with a ton of free features. You can track all of these different categories for free in the app, but there are a bunch of features that come included with the Sequel Plus subscription as well. Those include a where to watch feature for TV shows, so that if you don't know where a certain show is, you can quickly find what streaming service it is that you can find it on. Release reminders, so you can get a notification when a new episode, film, game, or book comes out. Sequel Plus includes a bunch of great widgets, including my personal favorite, the upcoming widget.
Yes.
I put it right underneath my up next queue on my home screen so I can see what I'm watching now and what I get to watch soon. It really helps me get excited for what's coming up. For games, there's a time to beat feature, which will tell you how many hours it's going to take you to play a certain game so you know what you're getting yourself into. You can create unlimited collections with Sequel Plus, which is how you categorize the different things you want to watch and keep things organized. And Sequel Plus includes some alternative app icons if you're the type of person who likes to customize your home screen. Now, Sigmund, you and I both use Sequel Plus. What's your favorite feature of the subscription and how do you use it?
I think the one that is most telling for me has been collections. And the main reason for that is because I buy a lot digitally. We know this. We talk about this way too much. I'm not too sure if that's a brag on my part or just an admission to a problem I have, because what I found out through adding my collection and logging what I'd watched was that probably about 30% of my digital movie collection I had not watched fully. So that is telling, and I'm sure I'm not the only one out there. So this is going to help, I think, push you in the right direction to check out those films that you got maybe on sale, and also to find those films that maybe you don't need to buy because they're already available on a streaming service that you're subscribed to. So from my personal standpoint, it's been a game changer for me, not just in terms of movies and TV shows, but of course Apple Arcade, where there are games coming out quicker than I can play them. So of course all of those different types of media all under one tracking app makes Sequel honestly the ultimate media tracker. I think in the weeks to come we'll have more to say. And we'd love to hear from our listeners once you try Sequel Plus and its benefits through a 1-year subscription, which you can get for up to 25% off by using the code MAGIC on sign up. And that is linked not only in the show notes, but also on this very chapter title.
Our thanks to Sequel for sponsoring Magic Rays of Light. On to this week's releases, Sigmund. Let's start with Apple Arcade. We've got a few new releases here, starting with Who Wants to Be a Millionaire Plus from Yukon. You can climb the money ladder in different cities around the world and build your team of experts to rely on when you get stumped. This version of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire includes daily challenges, unlimited play, and offline mode. It's available on iPhone and iPad.
Unfortunately, Devon, no call a friend lifeline for this version.
You can't call your actual friend. I mean, I guess you could if you pause the game and just start a phone call. But you can build your in-game experts to kind of help you out as you go along. The other unfortunate part is that you don't actually get the money at the end of the game. If you make it to the top of the million, there's no real currency that's going to come to you, unfortunately. We also saw the release of Lego Duplo World Plus from Story Toys. This game's available on iPhone and iPad for preschool-aged Lego fans. And the big Apple Arcade release this week is Slay the Spire Plus from Megacrit. I know a lot of people are very excited to see this one come to the service. It's a roguelike deck builder game where you choose between 4 different characters to begin your run. Enter the Spire and battle to defeat enemies by playing cards from your deck. No 2 runs are the same. Battle your way to victory. I've heard great things about Slay the Spire. I've never gotten into these roguelike deck builder games before, but this one looks very cool with the artwork and mechanics. And this is one I know a lot of people have been wanting to try, and now that it's on Apple Arcade, it's included in the subscription, why not give it a download? It's available on iPhone and iPad as well.
Now, whilst you're playing those games, of course, there's podcasts to listen to, with another new episode of Under Cover of Night releasing on Monday. But before that, we've got Friday Night Baseball, Baltimore Orioles at Minnesota Twins, followed by Atlanta Braves at Tampa Bay Rays. And both of those games are available on demand to watch whenever you want, alongside another weekend packed for MLS Season Pass, available right now in the TV app. And the season is starting to come to a head now. I think we're getting an idea on who's going to be chasing the title and who is going to be stuck in obscurity, at least until next summer. In terms of this summer, on Friday, we see the return of Duck and Goose with its Season 2 premiere, alongside new episodes of Swagger and The Crowded Room.
Then on Wednesday, we see the finale of Platonic, which we'll recap next week, a new episode of Hijack, and the highly anticipated 2-episode premiere of the Afterparty Season 2. We've got some fun Foundation-related extras for you this week. Apple's hosting a live viewing of the pilot episode alongside a Q&A with David S. Goyer on YouTube Monday, July 10th at 11 a.m. Pacific. And right now in the TV app, you can watch a Season 1 recap in 3 minutes ahead of the Sci-Fi Show's Season 2 premiere next week. That is a lot of TV to fit into 3 minutes, Sigmund. But I am excited that they're doing a recap because I really need a refresher going into Season 2.
Indeed. And speaking of recaps, from one groundbreaking Apple original sci-fi series to another, last week we saw the finale to, I think, one of the TV highlights for 2023 and maybe even beyond that, Silo. In a ruined and toxic future, thousands live in a giant silo deep underground. After its sheriff breaks a cardinal rule and residents die mysteriously, engineer Juliet starts to uncover shocking secrets and the truth about the silo.
We do not know who built the silo and why we are underground. We only know the world outside our sanctuary is death.
What if what we see is not what's out there?
I found something that might answer a lot of questions.
You have to stay quiet and keep your head down.
I need to find out the truth.
Season 1, of course, ended last week and is available in full across all of your screens. And we're going to recap the show in a moment, but because I've read all of the books, Devon, it's difficult for me to separate them from the show, and thus I want to be sure that I don't ruin anything coming from the Silo books, Shift and Dust. That said, I will say that the book from which Season 1 derives is called Wool, and is maybe a reference to the phrase to pull the wool over someone's eyes. This has been advertised, Devon, as a dystopian sci-fi. I've approached the show as more of a noir that starts with one small question that spirals into many. Tell me your thoughts on Season 1 of Silo from someone that hasn't read the books and couldn't potentially spoil anything going into future seasons.
You're right. Watching this season of Silo felt like descending the stairs of the silo itself, where you just spiral and kind of gets faster and faster as it goes. You're just sort of along for the ride. From the beginning, I loved the way that the world feels like it has such a rich history just as we enter it. There's the rebellion that they reference multiple times. There's all these different power dynamics between different groups within the silo itself. And there are these seemingly arbitrary rules, like the one about magnification. That's one that I'm still very curious to see how it pays off in future seasons. The series starts off as a story about Holston, the sheriff. We don't even meet Juliet until the end of the very first episode, but she quickly does take center stage. It's just kind of the way the narrative is laid out. It's setting up for her entry into the story before we really start to focus on her journey. What starts as a very personal and selfless investigation quickly spins out of control into a full-blown conspiracy that exposes the silo for what it truly is, a corrupt and compromised dictatorship. Like you said, it really starts with this question about the screens in the different rooms that are showing the outside world, and maybe they're not really showing the world the way that it actually is. There's this idea that maybe silo leadership is trying to keep people underground for some reason, make them think the world's uninhabitable when it really isn't. And there are multiple characters, including Holston and Juliet, who start to figure this out. And it, of course, leads them to going outside themselves and seeing what is out there. The whole series, we know that silo leadership is lying, but we don't know exactly what they're lying about or why. We think it's about what's actually going on outside the silo, but really it's about the happenings inside the silo that have to be covered up. And it's such an interesting sort of dynamic and reveal that as Juliet's trying to figure out what's going on outside, she gets some really shocking truths about who's in charge of the silo and how that power plays out. We still don't know all the whys. You know, there's a ton of mystery left to be unveiled as the series goes on, but narratively, I loved the different payoffs and the things that we discovered as it went.
Yeah, I think the things that we discover, especially from Juliet, they stem from that one question, what happened to my friend? Right? Really early on. And things just unfold to varying degrees. Now, as I said, I'm going to keep my mouth zipped when it comes to the narrative, but I do want to talk about the production because, you know, much like the characters that we're going to get into in a moment, and some performances in particular in this first season, I want to talk about the character in which the world envisions. You've got this incredibly cinematic world built in part through over 70 different sets with production design from Gavin Busquet and company. And what I thought was really interesting is that the executive producer and director, Morten Tilde, decided to make all of the building blocks circular, with all of the alleyways and everything else having a rounded element to it. And when I visited the UK set early on in production, my breath genuinely, Devon, was taken well and truly away by the sheer scale, and I'd hoped that would translate to screen. And I'm really happy to say that it did, in a big way. That's one of the things that I've heard so many people take away from Silo, and that positive response seems to have really reverberated across TV and film. We've seen people like Stephen King give their 2 cents on the world building as well. The environment obviously plays such a pivotal role in the story, more so than I think any other story. And that's because of the significance of the silo and the barrier it represents to the outside world, whilst also emphasizing the mystery of the outside world through the character detail and storytelling within its walls. The silo is so vast, right? You've crop farms, stories upon stories of spiraling stairs that interconnect sleeping quarters and factories with this bustling population. And of course, the strangest thing is it's all underground. Hugh Howey, the original author of the Silo books, talked about how realizing the world he'd written and seeing that come to life absolutely blew him away, describing it as bigger and more awe-inspiring than he ever could have imagined. And I think both of us couldn't agree more. Not only is the world building amazing, so is the photography. Mm-hmm. And before we get into the characters, I think the photography really brings the characters and the world to life. So a big shout out to the DP, Mark Patton. Just outstanding work, really.
For sure. There were some incredible talents behind the scenes, building this world and making it look lived in and making it look so suffocating while also being so big. Really impressive work. There were also some amazing performances on screen. I wanted to shout out just a few of them, starting with David Oyelowo as Holston. He anchors the first couple of episodes with a truly gut-wrenching performance. And even though he doesn't appear in the later episodes, his presence lingers over the rest of the season. Holston is just such a relatable and commanding character that his absence is really felt, not only in the silo, but in the series as it carries on. Of course, Rebecca Ferguson stars as Juliet, and she brings the audience along for the ride on her journey of discovery and growth. The thing that really touched me about her performance is Juliet is so tough. You really see, the world has just beat her down, and she's got this shell that she can handle just about anything. But she's at the same time so easy to empathize with. I love the glimpses we get into her backstory. Her relationship with her father, I thought the way that played out was just beautiful. She's just one of those characters that you definitely root for and you want to see get what she wants. I thought that was just a lovely performance.
One that I see you've got listed here, which I wanted to mention very quickly as well before you gave your thoughts, is Commoner Sims, who has this point of conflict that becomes quite unexpected, where he's prioritizing his family over his duties, which gets him into some bother, and that conflict spills over into his relationship, or lack of, with Bernard Holland, who is probably the most interesting character of all, I think.
I think the reveal of those two characters really go together. You get an impression of both of them from the beginning that turns out to be very different from where you end up with them. With Common himself, I was very scared of Sims when we first saw him. I think in the first 2 episodes, he says like 2 words, maybe, and just this very intimidating presence. But then you spend more time with him as the season progresses, and honestly, I started to think of him as kind of the comic relief. Not that anything he's doing is particularly funny, but how seriously he takes his job and some of the situations that he ends up in and the dynamics that play out, honestly, I thought brought a little bit of humor to the show. But then towards the very end of the season, his character just takes a really dark turn. Not through any decision that he necessarily makes, but when you find out what his real job is and who he's really working for and what that means for the silo and the people in it, yeah, he just ends up, in my eyes, going back to that really intimidating presence. And there is a vulnerability when it comes to his family, but I think you really do see his desire for power and control. And I think as we hopefully see more of him in season 2, I think that's going to be the dominating force in his life, trying to hold on to that control and get more of it if he can. So I think the days of funny Sims are over. They were nice while they lasted, but Common, I mean, as an actor, you just have to give him his props. He did a great job in this series, and I'm really happy that he was a part of it.
Yeah, I think this series exemplifies storytelling and storytellers, not just the actors, but of course the world builders, the writers, everyone from lighting and visual effects, costume design. The soundtrack by Atle Overson is a soundtrack that I've been listening to on walks recently. Just really ominous, and I don't know, there's something really special about that particular soundtrack that is going to stick with me for a long, long time. Of course, season 2 is now filming and expected to release on Apple TV Plus next year. And if you haven't yet, you can visit the silo now on Apple TV Plus with the complete first season now available to stream across all of your screens. And if you haven't yet, there's never been a better time to go deep underground. Now, of course, another packed week for Apple TV Plus and Apple Originals, but as we do every week, we delve into the TV app with one pick each from our Up Next queue. And Devon, I've got a funny feeling we are returning to a familiar place, somewhere we haven't been in quite a while with you, Disney Plus.
Yeah, my pick this week is from Disney Plus. It's Secret Invasion, the new Marvel series that just debuted on Disney Plus a couple of weeks ago. This series, it's kind of like a sequel to Captain Marvel, if you enjoyed that film a few years ago. It stars Samuel L. Jackson, of course, one of our favorites, as Nick Fury. And this is really the first project that he gets to be center stage on. We've seen a lot of Nick Fury in other Marvel projects, but usually he kind of pops in as a mysterious character, does something cool, and then leaves. This time we're really going to get into his experience and what it is that he is up to in this new phase of the Marvel Universe. Now, the twist in this series is that it brings us back to some beloved characters from Captain Marvel, and that is the Skrulls, who can, of course, transform into any person at will. And the big revelation of this series is that the Skrulls have infiltrated our world and that you cannot tell who is real and who is an imposter. And so Nick Fury has to take on a group of rebel Skrulls whose goal is to exterminate humanity and take Earth for themselves. Very comic booky. You know, I think the thing I like about the Marvel series is that they can get a little weirder because it's not a big film that you're trying to make $1 billion off of. This is a series for the fans to keep them engaged on Disney Plus. And it's week to week, which I enjoy. And I love getting more of Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury. If you like the Marvel stuff, if you liked Captain Marvel especially, she's not in it, at least as far as I've seen, but this really is a great follow-up to it and has some characters from that film. So definitely check out Secret Invasion on Disney Plus.
It's great to see Samuel L. Jackson getting back to being Samuel L. Jackson as we know him. Snakes on the Plane, still one of my favorite performances from him, and probably a great compliment to this week's episode of Hijack. But along those same lines, I wanted to recommend a movie that I plan to watch this weekend. It's not available in theatres in the UK until the very last weekend of August, whilst it's in theatres across the US, alongside purchase and rent options on the TV app right now, and that is a comedy horror, part of this mini renaissance that we've seen this summer for R-rated summer comedies, The Blackening. This is a weird one, Devon. It centres around a group of black friends who reunite for a Juneteenth weekend getaway, only to find themselves trapped in a remote cabin with a twisted killer. So they're forced to play by his rules, and the friends soon realise that this is no game. It's directed by Tim Story, who people will know for his work on Ride Along, Think Like a Man, and Barbershop. And the screenplay and screen story is by Tracy Oliver, who people will know for Girls Trip. And the great thing about this is it's not just a comedy. It's kind of going down that route that I love, which is delving into certain tropes of a genre, posing the sordidic question, if the entire cast of a horror movie is black, who dies first? So, not my words, the words from Lionsgate, but yeah, The Blackening is my up next pick, and you can check it out either at home or in theatres. It seems to be a real crowd pleaser so far this summer.
Very cool. Well, that's it for this week. We want to thank Sequel again for sponsoring this episode, and of course, we want to thank you for listening. Be sure to follow us on Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and review there. You can contact us on social media via the links in the show notes to leave us feedback, or you can email the show or send us an iMessage to mrolfm@screentimes.net.
We'll be back next week with the return of Foundation and a look back at Platonic. But until then, watch some Apple TV, play some Apple Arcade, and, you know, Devon, after this first season of Silo, I think it's time we both took a step outside.